Hello, this is Olivia, and welcome to my channel, Justice in Her Hands, with a new original story. Let's begin. The candle smoke clung to my throat, sweet and stale, when Blake leaned across the table and let it rip. You've given me nothing in my life. The room did that thing where every fork stops midair. A few laughs, the nervous kind. My palms went damp around a paper napkin, turning to lint in my fingers. I could smell the buttercream, feel the grit of spilled sugar under my heel, feel my own pulse beating in my ears like a kicked door. I didn't correct him, didn't list the rent payments or the late-night drives or the phone bill with his name tucked under mine like a secret. I just nodded, like a hostess taking an order. He puffed his cheeks, satisfied, and someone clinked a glass, and the noise came back, bright and ugly. I drove us home in my gray sedan because he'd had too much, and he snored on the couch like a factory saw. The house felt too small for the sound. On the mantel, the photo of him in his leather jacket tipped crooked, and I straightened it with a single finger, and then let it fall back crooked again. There's a point where you stop fixing things for other people. The point sneaks up, but you know when you hit it because your ribs stop feeling like a cage and start feeling like armor. In my bedroom, I pulled the duffel from the closet floor. One sweater, 2 pairs of jeans, the good flats, my mother's locket, the little fireproof pouch with titles and statements I had already copied at June's kitchen table. June Adler, God love her, had poured coffee so strong it could stand up and walk, and went line by line through every document, circling, underlining, whispering, "We'll do this right, Nora. We'll do it once." She's not family by blood, but she is by choice. Some bonds, you tie yourself. I stood in the doorway and looked at Blake sleeping with his mouth open, phone face down, and buzzing. Adults can look like children when they sleep. That used to make me soft. Now it made me angry, not loud angry, the quiet kind that feels like clear water running fast over sharp rocks. I set my keyring in my palm and felt the teeth. The garage bulb hummed overhead, cool, metallic, steady. I took a breath that tasted like dust and motor oil. Then I turned the ignition and eased the sedan into the street like I was stealing a boat off a calm dock. What people never tell you is that leaving isn't just motion, it's decision. One, then another. I drove to the overnight desk at the regional courier and slid a thick red envelope over the counter, prepaid and addressed. Inside were papers Blake didn't know existed, names he'd see and not recognize, signatures filed and stamped in triangles of blue ink. The clerk weighed it, slid it away, and handed me the receipt. "You want a tracking number?" he asked. I said, "Please," and felt something in my chest click into place. By dawn, the town smelled like wet concrete and coffee, and I was 3 exits down at a little motel with scratchy towels and fresh locks. I watched the sun pull a pale ribbon across the lot, and I dialed June. She answered on the first half ring like she'd been waiting with the phone in her hand. "You sure?" she asked. I looked at the receipt. I thought of the way every eye at the bakery had turned to me when Blake finished that sentence. I thought of the way I had nodded. "I'm sure," I said. And when Blake woke up to the empty driveway, he'd find the worst things soon enough, because red envelopes don't whisper, they thud. And some truths, when they hit, shake the pictures on the wall. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Morning at the motel came gray and the kind of light that makes everything look honest. My mouth tasted like old coffee and mint gum, and the air conditioner coughed every few minutes like it was clearing its throat to speak up for me. I laid the receipt from the courier on the spread, crisp paper, little black boxes, and traced the tracking number as if it were a road out of the old life. My phone vibrated on the particle board nightstand. A hard little rattle that jumped in my bones. No caller ID, then a text from an unknown number. Where are you? The next one hit a minute later. Mom, what did you do? I could picture him, standing in the kitchen in last night's t-shirt, hair at 6 directions, the birthday crumbs still stuck to the counter, the fridge humming. Seeing the folder I'd left under the rooster magnet, heavy stock, bright as a stop sign, my handwriting in thick red marker. For Blake. Inside, the notice to terminate his month-to-month, properly dated and signed, a list of what I would no longer pay, and copies of statements with my name under his, like a floor he'd been walking on without looking down. Worse than an empty driveway is the moment you realize the floor has edges. June's pickup pulled in front of the room with that familiar belt squeal, and when she stepped out, her wool coat smelled faintly of cedar from the closet she'd kept since her first apartment. She pressed a travel mug into my hands, coffee so strong it stung, and just looked at me. "We finish?" she said. I nodded because if I spoke, I might start explaining and apologizing to a woman who did not require either. At the credit union doors, we waited with 2 men in reflective vests and a woman in scrubs. The fluorescent lighting buzzed and smelled like warm dust. When the manager unlocked, the air was all toner and lemon cleaner. We sat with a banker named Marla, who wore a plaid blazer and a pin shaped like a tiny lighthouse. She read, frowned, read again. "Authorized user removal is immediate," she said, tapping the printout. "Overdraft linkage, gone. Line of credit, frozen pending review." She looked at me over the rims of her glasses. "Are you safe to do this?" The question landed in a tender place between my ribs. "Yes," I said, and my voice came out steady like a slow pour. I signed where the flags told me to sign. The pen left a groove my finger could feel even after I'd set it down. Next stop, the recorder's office. Everything echoed. The marble floors, the heel clicks, even the whisper of the man in the blue jacket asking for directions to the plat maps. June kept a firm hand between my shoulder blades, not pushing, just reminding. The notary's stamp pressed into the deed with a wet thump, and the seal rose like a coin under paper. House to trust. Trust to me. Me to myself, finally. I felt a small, surprising calm, the kind you get when you're holding something heavy the right way for the first time. By mid-morning, we were at the cell store. Posters of grinning people I didn't recognize promised unlimited everything. The clerk, boyish, polite, name tag said Weston, clicked, scrolled, and explained in a soft retail voice about lines and transfers and account owners. "Suspension will be immediate," he said. He had no idea he was cutting a cord that had kept me tethered by guilt for years. When the confirmation beeped, my phone buzzed so hard it skittered an inch. New message, different number. My card got declined. "Did you cancel everything?" Another. People are asking questions. My fingers went cold even though the store was too warm. I could see this playing out across town like wind through tall grass. Neighbors stepping onto porches, group chats pinging, the bakery crew replaying his birthday line with a little extra spice. I pictured the photo on our mantel going crooked again. I pictured myself not fixing it. A throb started behind my left eye, the warning drumbeat of the headaches I get when I swallow feelings whole. I pressed my thumb to the bone there, breathed in so the air went high and tight into my chest, then let it go slow enough to count a beat between heart and breath. "Public will come," June said in the parking lot, reading my face the way only people who've seen you cry in their kitchen can. "Let them. You're not hiding. You're adjusting." She told me we'd post a copy of the notice by certified mail, the boring legal way that takes the heat out of the story. And we would not lock anyone out. We would do it right. We would also change my locks this afternoon, because safety isn't drama, it's planning. The words settled on me like the good kind of weight, the kind your body can learn to carry. As we pulled away, the wind pushed against the truck and the sky brightened to a weak blue. My phone vibrated with one more message, and this one was not angry. It was short. It said, "Please pick up." I watched it until the screen dimmed. My hand wanted to move all on its own. But I didn't pick up. Not yet. You don't yank a stitch halfway through healing and expect a smooth scar. The post office smelled like cardboard and rain, and the counter clerk stamped the green certified slips with a rhythm that steadied my breathing. I slid the notice across and asked for return receipt. The little sea green card felt flimsy in my palm, but it meant proof, and proof meant I would not be painted as cruel or careless. On the way out, the automatic doors sighed, and I caught my reflection in the glass. Hair pulled back, jaw set, eyes clear in a way I did not recognize yet. June said, "That's step one," and her voice carried the same quiet pride she used when she taught me to set a boundary the first time and not apologize for it the second. The locksmith met us at the house just after noon. His name was Dion Maddox, forearms marked with little white scars, tool belt singing lightly when he walked. He listened to the situation without flinching and said we'd rekey the deadbolt and knob, document the cylinder numbers, and install a simple coded lockbox on the side gate so Blake would have access during the notice period. Clean, legal, safe, Dion said, and he worked with a practiced patience I envied. The smell of brass and graphite filled the entry. When he clicked the new key home, I felt the tiniest shiver in my wrists, like the nerves remembered every night I'd sat on that staircase waiting for Blake's headlights, wondering who he'd be when he came in. Neighbors noticed. Of course they did. Lindy Krause from across the street paused her dog mid-pee and called out a sugary, "Everything okay, Nora?" Her voice carried, and two garage doors lifted as if the houses themselves wanted to eavesdrop. I answered that we were updating locks, nothing more, and I said it pleasant, the way you talk to a cashier about the weather, so no one hears you counting your cash. Lindy's mouth did a sympathetic twist that belonged in church pews. Gossip always wears a velvet dress. June stepped between us with a wave and steered me inside before I started explaining my life to a sidewalk. At the utility office, the air was cold and smelled faintly of pennies. I ended automatic payments for Blake's extras, left the base services intact for the legal window, and removed him as an authorized caller. The clerk, a tired woman named Rena, slid a form toward me and said in a low, practical tone that she had a son who used to talk with his teeth bared. "Love tries to fix it," she said. "Boundaries keep you standing." I signed, my hand surprisingly steady. By mid-afternoon, I went to work at Maple Ridge Dental because hiding would make this a scandal, and I refused to feed it. The minty bite of the polish paste, the whine of drills behind closed doors, the bell at the front desk that always rings even when you are looking right at the person. Those sounds gave my body something predictable to line up with. I warned our office manager, Tasha Byers, that I might have a visitor and to call non-emergency if a scene began. Tasha narrowed her eyes and said she knew exactly how to make a scene end without spilling the waiting room magazines. Blake came just before closing, steps hard, cheeks flushed with the fury of someone who has found out his favorite shortcut is blocked. He did not look at the other patients. He looked at me, and in that look was a boy who once needed me to tie his skates, and a man who had learned that shame works if you say it loud enough. He said I had humiliated him and ruined his birthday week, and that people were already messaging him because they had seen me changing the locks like a thief. I felt the room tilt toward us, the dental assistant pausing with a tray, the retired teacher in the corner pretending to read. Public consequences, neatly delivered. I kept my voice calm, a notch above a whisper, so people had to lean in with their attention instead of their bodies. I told him we would speak at the precinct lobby with a mediator present, that I would not discuss money or housing at my job, and that this was for his dignity as well as mine. He laughed, a sharp bark that made the little boy near the fish tank jump. Then he saw June in the doorway, arms folded, eyes level, and something in him faltered. He asked, softer, if I would just step outside. My hands were trembling, tiny shivers I hid by flattening my palms on the counter. I wanted to go, to fold, to soothe. I almost did. Then Tasha tapped the small brass bell once, a polite chime, and said, "Sir, we keep it respectful in here." It was such a small sound. It anchored me like a nail through canvas. I told Blake I would text him a time and the station address. I watched the choice move across his face like a shadow. He left without slamming the door, but the silence after felt louder than any slam. The precinct lobby had that sterile lemon smell and a low hum from the vending machine, the kind that makes your nerves think of fluorescent lights even with your eyes closed. Vinyl chairs stuck a little when you sat. A child with pink barrettes swung her legs and counted ceiling tiles under her breath. June sat next to me, elbows on her knees like a runner before the gun. The community mediator, a compact woman named Alma Pierce, with a clipboard and a voice that could slice bread, laid the rules. No shouting, no threats, no cross-talk. Statements would be brief, practical, and written down. Blake arrived with his shoulders squared and a brightness in his eyes I recognized from a lifetime of moments when he was sure charm would do the heavy lifting. He glanced at June and then away. Alma nodded to me first. My mouth was dry, but my voice had ballast. I said that I had served a proper notice, that the house was now protected by a trust, that financial entanglements were being unwound. I said I would not be paying his personal lines or rescuing his overdrafts. I offered one tangible bridge, a grocery card for a limited span and a list of job leads, plus the number of a counselor who offered sliding scale. I said it all like a recipe, steps and measurements, no story. Blake leaned back. He said I was making him homeless to punish him for one bad sentence at a bakery, that I wanted him to crawl so I could feel tall. He said people were already talking because I had changed the locks like a landlord in a movie. Alma did not flinch. She asked him what outcome he wanted that did not include me paying for everything. He opened his hands, empty. Time, he said finally. A month. That word hit me in the sternum like a thrown stone. I looked at June. She did not nod. She did not shake her head. She kept her face steady so I would have to use my own. I can give you structure, not time, I said, and slid a sheet forward. Dates, resources, the notice period spelled in plain language, the condition that we communicate via text or email only. His jaw worked. He reached for the paper, and for a moment our fingers were near enough that I could see the crescent of ground-in grease by his thumbnail, the physical proof of the side jobs he did when he felt like it. He said he would take the month anyway. Alma tapped her pen. Wants are not orders, she said, calm and flat. Then June set a new folder on the table, and the lobby got quieter in my head. She had called the credit bureaus that morning and pulled a full report. On the second page, there it was. An installment account at River Street Electronics opened last spring with me as co-applicant. The signature beside my printed name looked almost right until you saw the way the loop on the R fell the wrong way. My throat filled with that metal taste I get before a migraine. I slid the copy to Alma. "This is not mine," I said. My hands were cold. My voice wasn't. Blake's eyes flicked left, then down. He said he had no idea how that happened. He said maybe the store clerk typed wrong. He said a lot of air. Alma's pen clicked once. "Ms. Hart," she said, using my last name like a seatbelt. "You may file an identity theft affidavit and a police report. You may also give Mr. Hart a chance to resolve it voluntarily before the legal route. That choice is yours." The weight of that choice pressed hard into the space between my ribs. A part of me still wanted to fold a blanket over his shoulders. Another part remembered the bank fees that had broken over me like cold surf, while he told friends his mother loved to pay for things. I told him he had 7 days, spelled out in writing, in words, not digits, to contact the store, close the account, and return or pay off the item with proof sent to Alma and to me. If he failed, I would file the affidavit and the report, and I would freeze everything else with my name on it so tight even telemarketers would slide off. He stared at the paper like it was in a language he didn't know. "It's just a laptop," he said finally, small. My breath fogged the air, even though the room wasn't cold. "It's my name," I said. Quiet. That landed. When the meeting ended, Alma handed each of us a copy of the agreement and told us to step carefully in our words online, which is exactly when my phone buzzed, screen full of a post from Blake's page, a paragraph of heat where I was cast as the villain with a lockpick in my teeth. The comments were already a climbing vine, half strangers, half folks from church who should know better. June took the phone, scrolled once, and shook her head. "Boring statement," she said. So I typed it. A plain note about legal notices, timelines, and my request for privacy. No defense, no story, just facts that left no oxygen for the fire. Walking out, the winter sun made the sidewalk glare. My legs felt like they belonged to a woman who had lifted something too heavy and then realized she could. "You okay?" June asked. I told her the truth. Not yet, but closer than yesterday. By day 4, the sky had that thin winter brightness that pretends to be kind and isn't. I sat at June's kitchen table where the varnish has a little ripple, the same place we sorted the first stack of statements and drafted my affidavit packet. Photocopies lined like soldiers, sticky flags, shouting where to sign. The smell of toner and hot plastic from June's old printer hung in the air. Every so often, she'd slide a fresh page toward me and say, "Slow is smooth," and the words landed like a hand between my shoulders. I called River Street Electronics on speaker so we both could hear the hold music, cheerful in a way that felt cruel. When a manager named Colton came on, his voice had the practiced politeness of someone who has stood in a lot of storm doors. He confirmed the account, the purchase, one high-end laptop, and the payment history that looked like a heartbeat, missing every other beat. "If the co-applicant contests," he said, "we can accept a voluntary return in good condition or a payoff. We will need a police report number to freeze collections." The shape of the day changed with that sentence. A report number. A hinge. Blake texted while I was still on the line. Long messages. All edge. He said the laptop was for work, that he'd straighten it out. If people would stop making this dramatic. And could I please answer the phone because texts make everything look worse. I typed back what Alma taught me. The deadline in words, the option to return, the address for written proof. He sent a voice note anyway. I watched the little waveform jitter and did not press play. My heart ratcheted high in my throat like it wanted to look over the counter and read the future. At lunch, I forced myself to go to Grocer's Barn because hiding feeds gossip. The automatic misters hissed over the greens, cool on my cheeks. A cartwheel squeaked like a question trying to get out. Lindy from across the street hovered by the oranges. weighing and reweighing the same one like it had secrets. A man I barely knew from church asked, too loud, if I ever thought of Blake's side. Before my tongue could fashion something honest and unkind, the cashier, a woman with a name tag that said Maricel, leaned over and asked, quiet, "Do you want paper or plastic, Ms. Hart?" The simple dignity of it caught me hard behind the ribs. "Paper," I managed, and that was the end of the public trial for that aisle. Back at June's, we drove to the courthouse annex. The building smelled like floor wax and damp wool. A clerk stamped the affidavit with a clack that sounded final, then slid a form for the credit bureaus. I filled each box with careful letters. Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. The names looked like weather systems I was learning to chart. When the clerk notarized, she pressed the seal and said, not unkindly, "You are doing this the right way." My hands stopped shaking long enough for me to notice I'd been cold for hours without knowing it. On the porch at home, a certified letter stuck out of the mailbox like a tongue. The little sea green card was back, signed in bold strokes, B. Hart, proof of service. My breath came out in a long, steady line. Inside, I set water to boil and listened to the kettle fuss. The house was clean in a way that felt temporary. The mantel photo was still crooked. I left it. Boundaries changed the tilt of everything. The picture was telling the truth. We were halfway through peppermint tea when Alma called. Her voice was level, so it took a beat to feel the ground shift. The electronics store had flagged a second application attempt tied to my information that afternoon, caught and denied. "Documented," Alma said. "Your timeline stands." I thanked her, hung up and stared at my phone until the screen went dark and reflected my face back at me. There it was again, that clear-eyed woman I didn't entirely recognize. June squeezed my hand once. "Next right step," she said. I nodded, and it felt less like permission and more like gravity. I filed the report on a Wednesday that smelled like wet wool and floor wax. The officer at the counter, badge reading L. Roscoe, listened without tilting his head like I was telling a story. He asked for the words in order, not the feelings. I gave him both anyway, because the feelings were the part that had my hands tingling, my scalp tight, as if a band had been cinched around it. He typed, nodded, and slid a printed page toward me with a case number written in careful block letters. The digits looked plain. They felt like a lock clicking. I sent the number to the store manager, Colton, and the reply came back fast and tidy. Collections froze, return accepted upon inspection, or payoff. June exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since last spring. We were drinking coffee that had gone gray with too much milk when Blake texted. The laptop was in use. The store wouldn't take it back today, and I was making this worse by involving strangers. I typed the same 3 things Alma had taught me to type. Deadline in words, options in writing, proof to both parties, and put the phone face down so I could hear the kettle hiss. We did the inventory that afternoon with June as witness. It was a quiet slog, the kind where the body remembers better than the eyes. We photographed each item in his room, made a list, boxed up clothes I had bought, left tools and personal papers where they were. The air had that closed-up dust smell, sweet and grimy, like old summer in a drawer. On the back of the closet shelf, my fingers found the crumpled program from his senior game, the one where he'd looked for me in the stands, and I'd raised both hands to show him I was there. I felt the ache of that memory stand up in my chest. I let it. Then I set the program on top of the pile marked Keep and walked downstairs with my spine tall so I wouldn't fold around the edges. He showed up before dusk, with 2 friends idling at the curb, engines low and sulky. He took in the open front door. the labeled boxes, the new key shining in the deadbolt, and his face went red in that high streak from cheekbone to temple that used to mean fever when he was little. "You can't lock me out," he said, and I told him we hadn't. I pointed to the coded lockbox on the side gate, to the posted notice, to the schedule for a civil standby if he wanted to collect early. His friends pretended not to be listening while listening with their whole bodies. Neighbors drifted onto porches, like the evening itself had called a meeting. Someone lifted a phone. I could feel the public in my skin, hot and prickling. The old muscle memory of smoothing, softening, apologizing twitched in me like a misfiring nerve. June stepped half a foot closer, not touching, just aligning herself at my shoulder so I could borrow the shape of her steadiness. "Text only," I said. "Station lobby if you want to talk." He laughed, a sound with edges. "You called cops on your own son." "I called process," I said, and the words surprised me with how true they tasted. He tried the knob anyway. The latch held with a small, serious sound. I called non-emergency on speaker so no one could pretend not to hear. Officer Roscoe arrived in a squad car that caught the porch light in a blue wash. He read the notice, the case number, the inventory list. "Civil standby is your next step," he told Blake, not unkindly, and he gave him a time window for the weekend. The friends shifted, bored now that there would be no scene to film. One of them muttered something about moms and rules. The engine revved. The street exhaled. When they left, the quiet felt earned. I stood in my own entryway, hands cold, heart still high, and watched the last of the day slide off the neighbor's mailbox. June locked the door, tested it once, and said, "You didn't wobble." The truth was, I did, all the way through, in 100 places no one could see. But I stood up in the wobble. That counts. I texted Alma the civil standby time, sent Colton the report number, and set my phone on Do Not Disturb. Then I washed the coffee mugs, one by one, until the water ran clear, and my pulse came down to something like human. The morning of the civil standby smelled like cold metal and damp leaves, the kind of air that makes your teeth feel too big for your mouth. Officer Roscoe met us at the curb, body cam chirping once, clipboard held like a lid on boiling water. June stood at my shoulder, quiet, solid, a whole fence I could lean against. I could feel my pulse in my wrists, a fast thrum that made the house keys weighty as stones in my pocket. We reviewed the inventory, printed lists, photos, time-stamped, a copy for Blake, and Roscoe nodded in that patient way that says, "We will do this by the book, or we will not do it." Blake pulled up alone in the dented pickup with the rattly tailgate. He stepped out swinging between swagger and plea. His eyes flashed to the porch where two neighbors pretended to sweep the same clean square of concrete. Public again. He said he'd just grab his stuff and be out of my hair. And the words came slick, like oil on water. I said we would follow the list. I said we would stay to essentials. He smirked at essentials, like the word itself was an insult. Inside, the air had that faint lemon cleaner and dust smell of rooms that have been waiting. He went straight for the television, and Roscoe cleared his throat once. "Not on the list," he said. "Even. No heat." Blake pivoted, yanked open drawers, made a show of tossing socks like he was proving a point to an invisible jury. When he reached the closet shelf, a paper slid out and fluttered under his boot. I saw the corner, and something in my stomach went cold, the way lake water goes dark under a dock. June reached it first, handed it to me without ceremony. A pawn slip. Dated the day after mediation. Item description, laptop, serial noted. My name nowhere, of course. But the date glared like a red light. I did not raise my voice. I handed the slip to Roscoe and asked him to photograph it for the supplemental report. He did, and the camera beeped, tiny and final. Blake said it was old, a mistake. The pawn shop doesn't even check. Everyone knows that. He said a string of things, most of them air and noise, and then he saw my face. I felt the wobble in my knees and let it move through me. I did not sit. I did not soften. Text only, I reminded him, and pointed to the boxes labeled with his name, neat as grocery aisles. He gathered clothes and shoes and the old trophy with the loose plate, muttering under his breath, but his hands shook when he lifted the box with the senior game program on top. For a breath, he looked 12. The ache broke open in me and hovered, wanting a home. I did not give it one, not here. On the porch, a crow heckled from the power line like it had been hired to narrate. Lindy across the street held her phone chest high, then thought better and set it down. Roscoe signed the standby completion. Had Blake sign, had me initial. Every pen stroke felt like cutting a small cord. Blake tried one last time for drama, turning to the little audience and saying I had ruined my own family. The words fell heavy and then didn't stick. You could feel the neighborhood losing interest the way a room loses heat when someone opens a door. Process is not entertaining. It is steady. After he drove off, the silence sat on my shoulders like a warm coat I did not trust yet. My phone buzzed. Alma, clipped and calm. Submit the pawn slip, attach it to the case, move on the full identity theft process now, not at the end of 7 days, because the new document reset the clock in a way the law respects. I looked at June. Some old part of me still wanted to grant grace like it was my job, to stretch time like taffy until everyone stopped feeling uncomfortable. The bigger part of me thought about my name, my house, and the way humiliation dries into a hard salt on your skin if you do not wash it off quick. We file today, I said. My voice didn't shake. June squeezed my elbow once. Then let's file, she said, and the decision went through my chest like a clean door latch clicking shut. The supplemental report smelled like toner and damp wool. Officer Roscoe slid the new pages across the laminate counter, and my name looked strange set among codes and statute numbers, a life boiled to fields and signatures. He photographed the pawn slip, noted the serial, and wrote the words, attached to case file, in tidy block letters that somehow made my lungs loosen. I called River Street Electronics from the parking lot. Colton said the serial was flagged, and surveillance logs would be held for a set window. His voice was all policy and process, and for once, that steadiness felt like kindness. Back at Maple Ridge Dental, Tasha caught me by the coat sleeve before the first patient. Someone had left a 1-star screed on the practice page, my name in it like a pinned insect. The air tasted metallic, the way it does right before a migraine. The doctor stood in the doorway, arms crossed, not angry, concerned in that careful, professional way. I gave them the boring statement I had prepared, legal notices, timelines, request for privacy. Tasha posted it without a single extra adjective, then sat beside me a beat longer than she needed to, just breathing in that slow, matched way that tells your body you are not alone. Blake texted mid-morning, a spiral of words, apology, accusation, apology again, circling like a hawk that cannot decide where to land. He asked to meet without Alma, just to talk like people. I typed what the rules require, station lobby or not at all, text or email only, deadlines unchanged. My thumb hovered over the send button while my ribs did their old squeeze. I pressed send. It felt like setting down a heavy pan without clatter. Near closing, A name I did not expect popped onto my screen. Kiara Holt. She dated Blake for a stretch last year, the kind of bright, restless girl who can hear the room's temperature from the doorway. She wrote that she had something I should see. We met at the laundromat on Mill Street because the place is loud with machines and nobody looks too hard at anyone else. The air was warm and damp. Fabric softener made the back of my tongue taste sweet. Kiara slid into the orange chair across from me and opened her phone. Group chat screenshots, time-stamped. Blake bragging about the pawn, about teaching her a lesson, about trying more credit with mom's profile because she never fights. A photo of the laptop on a counter under fluorescent light, the pawn shop logo just visible in the reflection. I felt my pulse change shape. It moved lower, steadier, not that frantic flutter I carry when shame is in the room. Kiara's mouth was tight like she was holding back 1,000 I told you so's. I left when he started talking like that, she said, eyes on the machines. I'm not getting dragged into a man's story. She scrolled again, stopped on a message where he asked a friend whether public posts get more sympathy than private ones. My throat hurt. Thank you, I said, and meant more than those 2 words could hold. She emailed the screenshots to Alma and to me, then hugged me fast and awkward, and left smelling like dryer sheets and resolve. At home, June was at my table with a yellow pad and 3 pens. We made a new list. Full identity theft packet with attachments. Notice to the pawn shop that the serial is flagged. A courtesy copy to River Street with the case number bolded. And one more decision I had been skirting. A request for a no-contact condition on the case if the posts continued, or if he appeared at my job again. My stomach dipped like the floor of a ferry underfoot. Part of me wanted to say no, to leave one soft spot uncovered so the story would not feel so final. June put her finger on the pad. This is not a story, she said. This is your name. I wrote the words down in my own hand. My pen left a groove I could feel even after the ink dried. That night, the house was very quiet. I made peppermint tea and stood at the window while the steam rose and disappeared. Across the street, Lindy pulled her trash bin to the curb and did not look over. That felt like mercy. Alma texted close to midnight. She had the screenshots, she would file them, and she would call the store in the morning. I answered with one word, received, and set my phone face down. The mantle photo was still crooked. I left it. Some truths are better told plain. The courthouse annex smelled like lemon oil and old books, like a school that had decided to grow up. A bailiff with kind eyes took my name and pointed me to a bench where people waited with folded papers and folded hands. June sat so close our shoulders touched, the everyday warmth of her cardigan steadying me more than any speech could. Alma slid in a minute later, small clipboard, precise pen, the human version of a level that keeps the line straight when your hands shake. The judge was not grand. A plain black robe, a tired face, a voice that asked for facts the way a nurse asks for symptoms. Calm, efficient, no appetite for theater. I laid mine out. The notice, the trust, the station rules, the forged co-signature, the pawn slip, Kiara's screenshots. I heard my voice from far away, even careful, each sentence placed like a tile. The judge looked at the exhibits, then at me, then at June, and something in his face softened without changing the decision part. Provisional no contact, he said, words that clicked in the room like a latch. 2 weeks, reviewable, communication through counsel or the mediator only. I signed, and the pen left a groove my fingertip could feel long after I set it down. Blake never came through the door. I do not know if that absence was mercy or strategy. When we stepped into the hallway, the light was too bright and my knees felt hollow, like a ladder where the missing rung surprises you. June handed me a peppermint. "Sugar after a shock," she said, and the candy snapped between my teeth, sharp and clean. Outside, Alma took the pawn slip copy and promised to press the store for surveillance preservation. She was already dialing when my phone buzzed with an email from River Street Electronics. Case number received, serial flagged, account frozen pending investigation, co-applicant liability suspended during review. The sentences were clipped and bloodless. They tasted like relief anyway. At Maple Ridge Dental, Tasha waved me into the back office and closed the door. The one-star post had been taken down by the platform after her harassment report. A patient named Mr. Delaney, fussy about his crown and his crossword, had left a calm paragraph about professional, steady service. It read like a lighthouse in a fog bank. I had to sit for a second and push my knuckles against my mouth until the pressure blew the tears back where they belonged. The day slid by in ordinary ways that felt newly holy. Insurance claims queued, reminder calls made. A little girl choosing blueberry toothpaste and giggling when it turned her tongue blue. The before and after of how people looked at me had shifted. Fewer stares, more eye contact, less performance. Even Lindy across the street managed a small wave that held no nosy hook, just neighbor. Near dusk, my phone lit with a text from an unknown number that only said, "He's posting again." I did not open the link. I forwarded the tip to Alma and put the phone face down. The kettle sang. The house held its own quiet like a bowl holds water. On the mantel, the photo was still crooked. I let it be. Earlier versions of me would have straightened it, then explained why to an empty room. June and I spread documents across the table like a map of a place we were still learning to name. We sorted by hearing, by deadline, by witness. We practiced the victim impact statement I did not want to write, the one that would say in small, clear language what gets lost when your name is treated like a coupon. My hands trembled once. I let them. They stopped when the doorbell rang. One neat chime that seemed to ask permission to be important. My breath caught high and sharp. June's head tilted, listening for trouble. Through the peephole, I saw a courier in a wool cap, shuffling his feet against the cold, holding a thick red envelope with my name written in block letters that were not mine. Not handwriting I recognized. He looked straight at the door and lifted the envelope once, like proof. My pulse stuttered in that old, frantic way, but my hand on the deadbolt was steady. I opened the door only as far as the chain. I kept the chain on and asked the courier to hold up his badge. The metal was cold through the gap, and the smell of winter air shouldered into the hall. He set the envelope on the mat and stepped back with both hands visible. I called Officer Roscoe before I touched it. June stood just behind me, one hand on the door frame. The small, solid touch that keeps your spine from bowing when habit wants it to. Roscoe arrived fast, body cam chirping once. Alma on speaker told me to open it with him there. The paper rasped under my thumb. Inside, a pawn redemption receipt stamped in purple ink, paid in full, and a plain house key wrapped in tape. On top, a note torn from a spiral. Block letters. No signature. Returned it. Won't come back. You can stop now. I felt the old soft place in me reach for that sentence like a thirsty thing, and beneath it, the steadier place I had built these past hard days, stand up and take the weight. Roscoe photographed the receipt, logged the key, and said the words I needed. This satisfies the store. It does not erase the order. The review hearing moved quick the next afternoon. The courthouse air dry as chalk. Alma laid out the pawn slip, Kiara's screenshots, the return confirmation from River Street, and the courier log. The judge read without hurry. No contact extended to 90 days, he said, voice even, with communication only through the mediator. He looked at me then, not unkindly. Ms. Hart, do you wish to speak? I unfolded the statement I had not wanted to write. I spoke about what it means when your name becomes currency, how the body learns to live in a small space when shame takes the big room, how boundaries are not anger, but oxygen. My throat shook once. I did not sit down until the last word was out in the air like a nail set true. After, I took the key to the locksmith and had it matched to a neutral lockbox code that did not live in my memory. I boxed Blake's last few things with June as a witness and scheduled a short window for pickup with the mediator copied. When the time came, a friend of his came instead. Quiet, head down. He signed the inventory, carried the boxes to a trunk, and drove off without looking back. The street did not gather. Lindy waved from her porch and did not ask a single question. That felt like an answer. At Maple Ridge, Tasha slid a folded note across the counter from Mr. Delaney. One sentence about steadiness and blueberry toothpaste and how people notice who shows up. The office smelled like mint polish and warm printer ink. The familiar whine of the suction line made a small, ordinary music. Before and after had changed shape. I could feel it in the way my coworkers met my eyes and did not search them for a story. That night, I stood in my hall with the lights off and listened to the house breathe. The mantel photo was still crooked. I left it that way. I brewed peppermint tea and texted Alma. Received, compliant, stable. June washed mugs and told me the same thing she had told me on the first morning of this. Slow is smooth. I set the red envelope in the file box, not as a wound, but as a record. Then I slid the chain across the door, the metal sure and simple, and I climbed into a bed that felt like mine in a way beds are supposed to. Somewhere in town, a man who was also my son was learning the long lesson of consequences. And for the first time in years, I slept. And the house slept with me.